right, good morning. We got a lot of stuff to get through because we are really going to start getting into the thick of it now when it comes to Revelation. We've reached Revelation chapter 6. So what's about to happen is the judgments that we see are about to start unfolding here. So a little recap up to this point. You have chapter 1, which is an introduction to Revelation. You have an introduction into who the author of Revelation is, being John, that is being spoken through by Jesus Christ. You have chapters 2 and 3, which is the letters to the 7 churches, and we see what is unfolded there, and we spent a good amount of time on those. Then you have chapters 4 and 5, which is all about Jesus, or which is all about God in chapter 4 and God's throne room, and then you have Jesus in chapter 5, which talks about him being the only one who is worthy to open the scrolls. And you have the worship that follows that. So Christ has been declared worthy in chapter 5. He alone is the only one who can open the scrolls. Remember back there was weeping. John looked up, he saw that no one was able to open the scrolls, and he began to weep. And then it was where Jesus came into the picture, and he was said that he was the one who could open the scrolls. And there was rejoicing that was from that, and worship that goes through that. And so now we get to chapter 6, and the seals are about to be opened. Now, here is how the rest of this book is going to play out for the most part. There are 3 major judgment cycles that are going to happen. Does anyone know what the 3 cycles are? We have the seals that start. What are the other 2?
Trumpets.
Yes, you have the trumpets that are the second, and then the last. The last are bowls. So you have the 7 seals that we're going to start with over these next couple of chapters. You have the 7 trumpets that are going to occur, and then you're going to have the 7 bowls. Now, there's a couple of different debates on what the meanings are behind these. Some people believe these are a chronological series of events that are going to happen. You're going to have the 7 seals that happen first, then the 7 trumpets, then the 7 bowls. Some believe that it's just a progressive intensification of how these judgments are coming out. And you'll notice that if you read the 7 seals, then the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls, it progressively intensifies through each of it. And then the last one, it's just depictions of judgment from different angles. A lot of people, or some people, will believe that when you look at this, you can say, oh, this seal looks a lot like this trumpet or this bowl. And so it's the same punishment or same judgment. It's just we're looking at it from a slightly different angle. And so that's kind of the 3 different views on the difference between the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls. I'm not going to tell you which one is better than the other. I do believe that each of them hold their own significant weight. I don't believe they are just the same judgment from a different angle. I do personally typically lean that these are more than likely progressively intensifying judgments that are given from the 7 seals to the trumpets, the bowls. I personally believe that one a little bit more of just why it's written that way. It's just a progressive intensification as the more and more judgment unfolds. But that's kind of the structure of what we're going to be looking at, is you have 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and then 7 bowls as we continue on through the book of Revelation. Now, here's an important thing to note, and something that we will note. These judgments do not and will not occur outside of Christ being the one to give the authority for them to happen. That is a major thing that we cannot forget about in this. If Christ says it to be, that's what will happen. But if Christ does not allow it, that judgment will not happen. It has to be given out by some sort of divine authority. And that goes back to chapter 5. Christ was the only one who had the ability to open the scroll, and that means Christ is the only one that through whom the judgment can be laid out. That is something that we have to remember. There is a divine control. There is a Christ-centered control that is at the center of all these judgments that are being laid out. And that should give us hope as Christians. It really should. This is not a matter of, oh, what was it, the year 2000, is that what everyone, Y2K, that was worried about, like, oh, this is when the end of the world is going to be? It's not some random judgment thing that's going to happen that we can speculate about of like, oh, the year 2000 is coming, obviously this is when the world's going to come to an end. And I granted, I was not alive during that time. I was born in the year 2000. I have no idea. I still can't understand why people thought the year 2000 was going to be when the end of the world was coming. I've tried to do a little bit of research. It just never made sense. Maybe someone can enlighten me to that at some point. But for some reason, people just had this idea in their head that when Y2K happened, that's it. That's the end of the world. That's not how this is going to unfold. This has to be given the authority, and it has some sort of control that is by God and through Christ for this to happen. And that should give us hope, that it's not just some random thing that's going to happen. So that's some theological things that are going on before we get into this. Now, the way that I've set this up, and we're going to see how it goes through the first couple of seals, and we may have to change it, but the way that I've written this out of how I want to view this is by taking a look back at the different views that we had at the very beginning. Remember, we talked about there was the 5 different views. There was the preterist view, the historicist view, the futurist view, the idealist view, and then the eclectic view. And so we're going to kind of go through looking at these seals through those lenses, see what people are saying about the seals from that lens, and what these seals can mean. So we're going to look at the interpretive views of that. And then lastly, what we're going to try and look at is the spiritual implications and possible physical implications of each of these seals. I know that sounds like a lot, and there may be a lot in that. And so if we need to change that up, we can. But as we go through this, I want to do the best that we can in the time that we have to really sit down. Let's talk about what these seals may mean. Let's talk about the different things that could come from this. And ultimately, let's talk about why these seals are even coming into play in the first place and what that's going to look like spiritually for us. So I'm going to remind you of what the major approaches to interpretation are, just so we can kind of get into the seals and understand the viewpoints we're going through. All right, so the preterist view, and specifically when it comes to the seals, they believe that they largely refer to events that are surrounding the Roman Empire. Remember, the preterist view looks and says that everything going on that you read about in Revelation is specifically about the Roman Empire. That's what they believe. They believe that all of it comes back to the persecution that you see. They believe that it all comes back to the destruction of Jerusalem, and that's what the seals represent. And so that's the preterist view. That's how they view the 7 seals as it's unfolding. The historicist view views the seals as symbols of church history and the unfolding over the centuries. They look at the different seals and they say, okay, well, we can see this in different church history events that go on, and we're going to continue to see these things throughout the rest of the future and throughout the rest of history. The futurist view views the seals as some sort of future tribulation that is supposed to happen that precedes Christ's return. So what we're looking at is they believe that these things will happen before Christ comes back. These will be these signs, as we will say, that are to come to pass so that when Jesus comes back, we are aware and ready for it. Then you have the idealist view, which the seals represent or symbolize these realities that we see throughout the present age: conquest, war, famine, death. What these symbols recognize and realize, they say, more than likely, those seals are just a representation of that. And then you have the eclectic, which kind of puts all of it together. Eclectic will say that these can symbolize some of the things that happened with the fall of Jerusalem, but more than likely, it does show for future signs that are to come, and then especially the idealist, where it's talking about these are recurring realities of conquest, war, famine, and death. Which are the 4 horsemen that we're going to kind of talk about hopefully this morning, but we'll see how far we get in that. So I know that's a lot of information, and we haven't even read the first 2 verses of chapter 6. So this is just kind of how we're going to try and go through it. if there's any questions or changes that you want to make and how we approach this, please talk to me about this. I would love to hear what different ways you would like to see or study this. And so I am open to critique and criticism on this, and I'm open to changing it if that's what's needed. But let's start with seal number 1. So someone read for me Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. Okay.
I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals, then heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there beside me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown. And he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest.
All right, so seal number 1, you have a what colored horse? You have a white horse. He's given a bow, and he has a crown that is on him, and it says that his job and what he's going to do is he's going out to conquest. What does it mean to conquest? He's going to war. Yeah, he's going out to war. His goal and what he's going to do is he's going to conquer whatever is before him. Right? And when we talk about conquest, when we talk about conquering things, my mind immediately goes to Alexander the Great. He was really good at being someone who is a conqueror. He had a lot of conquest. He was very successful in his conquest, and we see him taking his battle or his troops into battle, and very often through that winning that battle and conquering whatever land. And so this is the visual image that we are given. It is a white horse with a person that is on it that has a bow, and he's given a crown, and he's ready to go to war. That is his job and what he's going to do. Now, when we look at this, I guess I'll ask this question and then we'll get into it. If I were to ask you what this seal represents or means, what would your first initial thought be? Remember, these are judgments that are being given out over humanity. So what would you say that this white horse, this first seal, would represent? Okay, so that is a major view, is that Jesus is the one that is coming out on the white horse, right? Jesus is coming through in conquest and ultimately will conquer over earth, over humanity, over Satan, over the powers of death. That is a major view that is held there, that Jesus is the one that fulfills and represents the white horse. Now, does anyone have a differing view? Because remember, the way I want to set this class up is I don't want us to just get stuck and believe just one simple thing or single thing about it. I want to have discussion about what are these different views. What could they represent?
I think we're being entered. If you think about this, it's kind of a new image of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately went, go and look at any old. Here's a photograph of George Washington.
Mm-hmm.
How were the paintings made to George Washington? What was he always sitting on?
A white horse.
A white horse. There's image here. There's scenery here. There's he's in his crown, and this is a different image we see of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a lamb. We've seen him ride a donkey coat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now you have it.
Palm branches, but now we're seeing, and here, this is a new image of Jesus.
Yeah, and it really is. Does anyone? Okay, let me ask this question: does anyone believe that this does not represent Christ? I'm just putting out devil's advocate here. Right, I personally believe that this represents Christ, by the way. But I want to play devil's advocate as well, right? So the very first view is that of Christ. This is the most commonly held view. It's the most scholarly view of it as well, that the interpretation represents Christ as being someone who is going to lead some sort of military conquest. Now, we know that to not be a physical military conquest, but a spiritual military conquest. We understand it to be that he's going to expand his empire, Now, what does that look like? Well, he's got you and I as foot soldiers that we are going to build upon his heavenly kingdom, right? There's going to be a dominion that he's going to have, and we see that through Christ the Lion as being the head of that kingdom. And there's going to be some sort of spiritual conquest in history, and I believe that that part has already been rolled out. I believe that part was done at the cross, that he has conquested over death. And it's what it says in Scripture, that he has now been able to defeat death, Satan, and everything else, and he's put them underfoot. Right? So this is the most commonly held view, the most scholarly view that we see of Jesus being the one who fulfills that first horse, that rider on the first horse. This one, all the other horsemen that we're going to come to see carry what we will consider negative realities. This one can't be seen as negative depending on the way you view it, which is the second view that we'll look at. The rider carrying a bow, it's an instrument of warfare. The interesting thing is, I think the most interesting thing to me is that he's carrying a bow. And the only reason I say that is because usually when we associate Christ carrying some sort of weapon, it's usually the sword of what? The sword of the Spirit, right? And then not only that, but you and I have been told that we have been equipped with the sword of the word, right? The word is like a double-edged sword, and that's supposed to be our weapon. So to me, and it's really splitting hairs on this, and I don't know why a bow was chosen instead of a sword, and I don't think it really matters why a bow was chosen instead of a sword, but I think it's really interesting because most of the time when we picture Christ, if he was going to be carrying some sort of weapon, I figure his weapon of choice would have been a sword, or that's what have been associated with him. Again, I don't think there's anything really within that. I think it's just the image that John was given. But I just find that to be slightly interesting of him carrying a bow. But then the biggest one, and the reason I think this is the most commonly held, is because we've already seen some of this conquering come out of Christ to begin with. I think we've already seen that Christ's mission was to conquest over his enemies. And that's what he has done, and that's what he is doing for you and I as well, right? This is not, we go back to the preterist view. The preterists believe that all of this has already happened and is done with. I don't believe that. And here's why. I still believe that even to this day, in this moment, Christ is still conquesting. He is still going after victory. Not that he hasn't already won the war, but you and I are still people that he is concerned about, and he is still conquesting for. He is still trying to win your and I's soul. There is still a spiritual war that is going on in the heavenly realms. And so I truly believe that there is still conquest that is going on. And so I don't believe the preterist view that all of this is said to be done with. Some of you may disagree with me on that, and that's okay. And I would love to have conversation about that. But that's the view number one. Now here's view number two. View number two takes the opposite end, right? View number two says, no, this is not Jesus, but this represents this false sense of peace or this deceptive conquest. They believe